Greetings, Kindred. Welcome back to our World of Darkness and another episode of Level by Level, and the last episode of the core book, Thin-Blood Alchemy levels. This is a momentous occasion because after this episode, we are going to be moving on to another power that I'm going to cover. I might even put up a poll because 6 people pay attention to those on the Facebook page. I cannot wait until I can do polls on YouTube. I really can't because you guys are so much more interactive. But today we are going to be handling level 5 Thin-Blood Alchemy and everything that it can do. So let us get into that. The book states that once you achieve level 5 Thin-Blood Alchemy, the alchemist can develop formulae to counterfeit level 4 powers of other disciplines. The formula take a month to distill and at least 3 years of research. 3 years. That's a momentous amount of time. And I gotta say that looking at the previous level, the level 4 where you can counterfeit level 3, it does not take 3 years. No, it only takes 3 months, so you're jumping a dramatic amount of time. But we are talking about level 4 powers here, and this is when the disciplines take a turn for the disturbing. We're talking horrid form. We're talking shape-shifting into multiple forms. We're talking the ability to summon other things like in presence. We are talking about some major game-changing disciplines, and really it should take a little while for Kindred to learn the ability to get these things, but 3 years of research can be a lot of time. Now, I do want to point out that it does say 3 years of research, which means, in my thought as a storyteller, if you have a Thin-Blood alchemist who has inherited their notebook of formula from some other practitioner, maybe an NPC or something, they themselves could have done the 3 years of research. This is the development of the formula, not the ability to use it. And again, that's just my thoughts, but maybe I'm just a nicer storyteller, who knows. So getting on to the main event, the level that we are handling today on Level by Level is Awaken the Sleeper, probably one of the most important levels of Thin-Blood Alchemy that would actually give elders in groups such as the Camarilla a reason to want to keep Thin-Bloods around. Now, the description of the power is, this formula results in an elixir, which, when added to human blood, can awaken a vampire from torpor. That's pretty intense, considering the fact that when a vampire falls into torpor, it's not as simple as, here, drink this, wake up. Now, just to go over the details on torpor, let's go ahead and turn to page 223, class, in our books, in our core books, and it states, Kindred dwell in a halfway state between life and death. Between vampire, unlife, and final death lies an undead hibernation known as torpor. While in torpor, the vampire lies completely dead to the surroundings, reduced to the appearance of a shriveled corpse. They cannot use any disciplines or react in any way to ordinary stimuli. Vampires remain in torpor for a length of time dictated by their humanity. If staked, the vampire remains in torpor past the time until someone or something removes the stake. Removing a stake after a period of torpor expires awakens the vampire immediately, or that night. Vampires awaken from torpor at a hunger of 5. Once their period of torpor expires, vampires in torpor who are not staked can make a resolve plus awareness test every time a potential victim enters the vicinity. If successful, they can awaken long enough to feed, likely entering a hunger frenzy during the process. Once their hunger drops to 4 or below, they rise fully recovered from the effects of torpor. Vampires enter torpor in 3 ways: from hunger, from damage, or voluntarily. If a vampire attempts to rise for the night with a hunger level of 5 and fails their rouse check, they enter torpor. If a vampire takes enough aggravated damage to fill their health tracker completely, they automatically enter torpor. They then unconsciously attempt to mend damage, trying to heal 1 health point per night. If they restore themselves, heal all health damage, and mend or recover from all impediments or critical hits, they can rise again. If failed rouse checks to mend damage drive them to a hunger of 5, they enter torpor as above. A vampire who enters torpor voluntarily still increases their hunger every night until they enter torpor as above. The same rules then apply. To cut short a period of torpor, one can feed a slumbering vampire enough blood of higher blood potency than theirs to slake 1 hunger. And that last part right there is the reason why this formula is so important. If you want to wake a vampire up from torpor, it has to be blood potency that is higher than their own to wake them up. And in some cases, especially with the elders who actually choose to enter torpor, that can be an almost impossible ingredient to find. So, with all that information bubbling around in our heads, let's go ahead and take a look at the ingredient list for this formula. The alchemist blood, as always, right? Choleric or sanguine human blood. Choleric or sanguine, not both. Adrenaline, ammonium carbonate, hartshorn, caffeine or benzotrin, or melatonin. That's kind of interesting due to the fact that melatonin is used to make people go to sleep. But some people have this wonderful little thing where when they take melatonin, it actually wakes them up. I unfortunately deal with that on occasion, and I have insomnia, which really, really sucks. I'm going to continue drinking coffee now. So digging in a little bit deeper, like I was saying, we've got the 3 types of vitae that can be used. We do have to have the alchemist vitae. Duh. Caloric or sanguine vitae is on there, but let's look at some of the other stuff. We have adrenaline. Adrenaline is one of those things where it's not very surprising that it's on there. Adrenaline is a hormone secreted by the adrenal glands, especially in conditions of stress. Increased heart rates, blood circulation, breathing. It's preparation for muscle exertion. So that does make a lot of sense. That is one of the main components to this formula. And then we come to ammonium carbonate, which is actually also called baker's ammonia. This is made from hartshorn. It's a type of water-soluble white crystalline salt used as a catalyst, as a leveling agent for baked goods. So it makes things rise. A leavening agent. Like I said, hartshorn, which is what baker's ammonia comes from, is also on that list. Caffeine, which, that's just kind of an obvious why that would be there kind of thing. Now, benzotrine. Benzotrine is actually the brand name for amphetamine sulfate. It's a drug to treat many different conditions that was actually very commonly used in the 1930s to 1970s, but misuse of the drug eventually led to a major decrease in production and tighter control of the drug. Today, amphetamine is used to treat ADHD, narcolepsy, and obesity. So again, since it is used to treat narcolepsy, it does make a lot of sense. And then there's melatonin, which again is very interesting. Melatonin is, again, it's a hormone that's made by your body. It generates the day and night cycle, and it's the sleep. It deals with the sleep-wake cycle. So I guess considering the fact that it is used in both actions of the body, both going to sleep and getting up, it does make a little bit of sense. You can get melatonin from most pharmacies over the counter. It is seriously just something you can take as a supplement to help you get a better night's sleep. So getting into the system of how this works, the alchemist taps their own vessel if they're using an outside source, the calcinatio method, or their own vein if they're doing the Anthenor Corporis, where they're using themselves as the distillation device. To get the Awaken the Sleeper elixir if they do not use Fixatio, and that is if you take all of your stuff. Fixatio, if you remember, is when you take it and you put it inside of a furnace and you cook it all together. Another way to distill on the outside of the body. They then mix the elixir into human blood. For each success above 2 on the distillation roll, the elixir can awaken a vampire of that blood potency. For example, Hari gets 5 successes on his Awaken the Sleeper distillation roll. This elixir can awaken a torpid vampire of blood potency of 3 or less. So a 5 minus 2 equals 3. In some of your older books, it's going to say 5 minus 3 equals 2. But that formula was errated in 2019. So it is now 5 minus 2 equals 3. So that is such a very interesting way of looking at it. But there are also details for the distillation methods on this one that we do need to go over. The Anthenor Corporis, and if you remember, that is when you are using yourself as the distillation method. The alchemist can tap their own vein once per night for the elixir until the next feeding, or until they reach a hunger of 5. They need not pay the distillation cost again. So you could actually raise several vampires with this as long as you continue to pass your rouse checks once the original distillation is complete. And then there is calcinatio, and I really wish that I had the ability to pronounce these correctly, but this is what you guys are getting. If the vessel survives the tap. So calcinatio is if you're using another human. If you're using a human as your distillation use. If the vessel survives the tap, the alchemist can tap them again in a week for more elixir. They need not pay the distillation cost again, but the vessel pays the health cost. 5 aggravated damage. That is insanity and could definitely kill a human. Each time they're tapped, they have to pay 5 aggravated damage. The alchemist can also simply feed the vessel's blood to the sleeper directly, and that actually seems like it might be a little safer, and stopping the tapping like that and the removal of the blood, that could very well wake them up. But there is also that fact that if you wake someone up from torpor through feeding, they could very well go into a hunger frenzy, so there is a chance of that vessel dying anyway. Before we move on to the next subject, I do want to point out, please think what kind of story you want to tell for your Thin-Blood. Because the distillation methods of Thin-Blood Alchemy are something that are going to be unique to each individual vampire. And there are certain ones that are going to be dirtier than others. It's going to add a level of grimy storytelling to your game. Imagine what the distillation method is like for your character. What is their humane goals in this game? Do they have humane goals? Are they trying to reach a specific level of kindred existence? Are they just trying to survive? Are they trying to thrive? Are they willing to go the distance and torture people to do what they're doing for the drugs that they're creating? Because that's what they're doing. They're creating kindred drugs at this point. Now, the reason I'm pointing that out so much is because there's going to be a lot of people who are like, well, using yourself, doing the Anthenor Corporis, does seem like the easiest method. And yeah, it is. It is definitely the easiest method. You do tend to have more access to a lot of your elixirs over and over again when you're using that distillation method. But is it your character? Because that's what matters. What really matters is what kind of story you are trying to tell in your game. And being the guy who has the furnace, who's taking all those odd ingredients and putting them inside of the furnace, or has people strapped to tables, and imagine the cinematic atmosphere of that, of what you're creating. This is something that you really should work with your storyteller on to decide what kind of person you are trying to portray. This is the end of Core Book Thin-Blood Alchemy. We will be moving on to another discipline after that. That is in our core book. I want to get done with all of the core book information before we move on to the next book. And I'm probably going to go by publishing and distribution date, because there are so many amazing sources of information that we have. So you can look forward to us coming back to Thin-Blood Alchemy again in the near future. I am Voivode Maquette. This has been Level by Level, and thank you for joining me as we study through Thin-Blood Alchemy. Class dismissed.